is Hasani, and this is my brilliant wife, Danielle, and we are the Pettifords. We've been married for 20 years, have four beautiful daughters, and we are the co-founders of Couples Academy, which is a private practice that really works with couples all over the world, making a difference in their lives. We typically work with couples who are in crisis, those on the verge of divorce, those impacted by an affair, who are trying to navigate through that. And we help to bring personal healing and marital restoration to their lives.
Yeah. How did you decide this is what we're going to go after? Was this always the plan?
Well, no, it was never part of the plan. You know, oftentimes God will share with you what your purpose is, oftentimes through pain. And we were on the verge of divorce. I don't know, somewhere between the fourth and fifth year, we reached a horrible spot in our marriage.
Almost a breaking point. Yeah.
Almost a breaking point. And the crisis that we went through, and all along she had been saying, we need to go see someone, we need to go to a counselor. And
you didn't want to go.
Like a man, I wasn't interested in doing it because I don't need nobody telling me how to live my life. You know, I didn't want to go to the church because the community was too small and I didn't want people in my business. And I'm like, we could read a book, we could figure it out on our own. And things got progressively worse till they reached a breaking point. And then one day I was driving in the car and I heard someone, you know, I think it was Gary Smalley at the time, who had been a marriage expert. And he had this program that I said, let me invest in this program, because he had been saying things that Danielle had always been saying that I didn't want to hear, or I just couldn't hear because of who was it. It wasn't the message, it was the messenger that I was turned off from. Right. And so once I decided to say, you know what, let's take a plunge into this. And I shared these tapes with Danielle. She wasn't open at first.
I was completely uninterested. I was completely uninterested. He would sit down on the couch. He would put these tapes in the VCR. Remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. Blow on it.
He would sit there. Yeah, blow that VCR tape.
Yes.
Put that thing in there, hope it plays and doesn't have the little lines going across it. And I would just tune out. And I was checked out and I was uninterested and I was a non-believer. You know, I kind of at that point felt like, you know, once that in-love feeling is gone, it's dead and gone. There's no resurrecting it. It's like we're just going half on kids, half on bills, and we're just going to figure this out until we can't take it anymore. And then we'll see what happens then. But that's kind of where my mindset was. But he was very persistent and he kept playing them. And he was doing this like daily and he was showing some semblance of change. And I just started saying, hey, you know, maybe there is a chance here. Maybe he actually can do things differently. And that was kind of like the beginning of the change.
And then we said, we found out about a course that was being offered by a church to become marriage and family coaches. And we said, let's do it. But our motive was to do it for us, to save our marriage, to make sure that we never go into that dark place. And I think from there, a passion was created. And we began to share this information with others. And
there was a little deviation because when we launched Couples Academy, we thought it was going to be like a couples club. We thought it was going to be for couples who are happy that want to be happier. But we learned later that happy couples, they're good. They don't need to be happier. Really, we found ourselves sitting with couples at our dining room table, and we're supposed to be having game night and having a good time. And we are talking about really serious issues. Yeah. And so we just started
at a game night.
These couples.
At a game night?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a game night. We're supposed to be having fun here. And we're talking about some deep issues. And so we're like, you know what? We're going to give what we have. We're going to serve with what God gave us. And that was the beginning.
Okay. So let me back up though. Because part of what I wanted to get into in your own stories, because I know that you've got a lot of examples from your work, but in your own story, I want to know the picture that you set out to have for your marriage. So like no one gets married hoping that their marriage blows up, right? Nobody says, I do, going, I can't wait till the bomb goes off and we have devastation everywhere. But what picture did you have coming in? What was the perfect picture of marriage for you?
Well, for me, I mean, we were in love. We were young. We loved each other, and we would have sex every night. We would after. Well, no, I said the vision.
I got it. I got
it. We didn't have any sex until we actually got married, right? So there was great anticipation.
I got a horn. Exactly.
And so there would be sex every night, right? Yep. We would have every bit of our finances in order. Every bill would be paid. We would travel the world. We would enjoy life. We would have kids at some point, and we would be the picture perfect family that we saw on television or in the movies that everybody always wanted to thrive forward to become. And we were hit with the hard reality that life just doesn't work out like that.
Yep. And for me, I would say very similar perspective, except for I was coming from a place of deficit, right? So I didn't have that. So I was looking for the dream that I wish I had. I came from a broken family. I didn't have my parents under the same roof with me. So in my imagination, it was all those things that he said, but also I would be the one that actually has this family, that we stay together and we fight through it all. And my children would have both a mom and a dad. So that was a really important perspective for me.
Did you know how to do that though, Danielle? Like obviously opposite, right? I know what I don't want, but did you know how to get what you wanted?
I kind of feel like I stumbled upon it. It was a blessing of God to meet Hasani, because prior to, when I was living in a very toxic space, kind of just doing whatever I wanted to do, living the worldly life, the kind of guys that I would attract were just not the kind of guys that you live the rest of your life with. That is not the fairy tale kind of a guy. And so really it was really leaning into God. And I was around maybe like 20 when I really actually gave my life to God for real as an adult. And I started to clean up my life and change things around and really get connected and close to him, that I found myself in a position to actually meet him. I don't think prior to that I would have done it. So to answer your question, no, I did not know how to do it. It was really me submitting my life to God that led me to the right path, if that makes sense.
And Jeff, I came from a 2-parent home. So I grew up with mom and dad, and, we were the typical middle-class household, everything, vacations, all of that. But I didn't know how to do it. And I think it doesn't matter what your background is. Most of us are guilty of doing marriage wrong. That's true. And at some point we have to learn how to do it right. We all have our own idiosyncrasies and flaws and just stuff that we come into relationships with. We call it like that family marinade, and it causes conflict in a relationship. We have expectations about what marriage is supposed to be based upon what we saw in our home, or what a family is supposed to look like based upon what we desire or saw in our home. So you have these two or didn't see. And you have these two conflicting, competing views. And conflict is nothing more than two people with two different agendas operating in the same space at the same time, and it just doesn't work.
And can I just add this one piece, that that whole idea of not knowing, like I had on my bucket list that my husband had to have come from a 2-parent home, because I felt like he would know what to do. Like, I got to marry a guy that has a mother and a father in the home, because he has a template. And I thought that he should be perfect and he should have it all together. And he has no excuses because he came from a 2-parent home. And it's just not the way it goes. Like, we do not know how to do marriage. I don't care what paradigm you came from. You still have to learn how to do marriage correctly.
That's so good. And it's so interesting too. To have those two perspectives come into each other. I've got both parents at home that give me a picture of marriage, and then I've got no picture of what this is supposed to look like, but I know I don't want this. So, okay. So you kind of hinted at your sort of crisis moment in your marriage, at least. Was it a slow burn to that moment, or was it like something happened and a so to speak, a bomb blew up in your faces of your marriage? Or was it more of like a chipping away at your unity eventually just turned into, who are you? I don't know who you are anymore, kind of
That's a great question. For me, from my perspective, I think it was more of a chipping away. It was a slow decline, a slow unraveling, and over time you just lose all stamina, all belief, all hope. It's just almost like if you ever watch a video game, right, and you're the player and you have the battery life at the top right corner, and at one moment is full, and then it just keeps diminishing and diminishing and diminishing till it gets down to nothing, and then you're just dead. And so there was a deadness, if you will, in our relationship at some point, and it just seemed like it was so hard getting things back on track. And there was nothing that was majorly identifiable that we could point to and say, this is what it is. It was an accumulation of things in a variety of different areas over a long period of time that just took its toll on our relationship.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like for me, I saw Hasani as like my Romeo, I saw him as the perfect guy. I saw him like I found this needle in a haystack, And so when reality sets in life, we had our first child 1 year after we were married, bills, and then reality of, wait a minute, we have zero in the bank. Like, whoa, then him hitting the road and having to travel and speak and hustle. And now I'm pregnant with baby number 2. And guess what? Bills are not being met, but you're still speaking and traveling, and lights are getting turned off. So it's what he said. But when you start to get into the details of it, you can see how like something that seems so amazing can quickly decline because of the realities and the nuances of marriage and doing life together.
Yeah.
When you start doing life together, you have to come and have a meeting of the mind. You have to support each other's initiatives and what their drives are. And you have to try to figure out what's the best decision to make. And, you wouldn't do it that way if it was you on your own. You would do it this way. But now that you're together, you got to come together. And there's so many conflicts. And then you do something together, and then you realize that didn't work, and now you're blaming each other. And so it really happens, that slow decline, it happens pretty quickly when you start to consider how it happens, but you don't know when you find yourself in the pit until you're literally in the pit and trying to figure out how to get out.
Exactly we talk about like the 5 major issues that most couples struggle with. Communication, finances, sex, parenting, and in-laws. And I think we were hit by all 5, over a period of time. And it just weighs on you. There's a major distinction between marriage and relationship. And we didn't know. We thought that they were the same. We use them interchangeably. And so there were deficits that were created in our relationship because we put focuses or a focus on particular areas, and we left other areas just neglected. And that led to the deterioration of our relationship within our marriage. And that's how we wound up finding ourselves in crisis.
I'm curious something, Hasani, from like the man's side, and then I want to hear this from your side, Danielle, is was there a burden on you? Because like she's talking about lights getting turned off. Did you feel like I got to go out here and take care of my family? And go ahead.
So this is something that I think every man or most men can understand. Think about a professional athlete. Right. High school, college, now they've made it into the pros. They're doing well. They're making money. Everything's awesome. And then they have a major injury, and now they have to retire early. Now they're in an identity crisis because they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm a football player. That's who I am. And so they don't know what to do, where to go, how to adjust, how to become highly adaptable, how to pivot. And so for me, the majority of my young single life, I was a speaker, an author. I'm traveling around the country, making impact. And so many people would say, listen, you're married now. You're a husband, you're a father, you got to stay home, you got to get a job. And I'm like, job? What does that even mean? Like I'm supposed to be on stages, speaking, traveling the world. So I could never keep a job. I remember I had 2 jobs at the same time.
You couldn't keep a job?
Broker. Brother.
No.
What?
I was a mortgage broker And I worked in restaurants trying to, make tip money to pay bills. And I remember I was so focused on my career, my business, my passion. I remember one day I was pulled into the office at the mortgage company. They were like, Hasani, your sales aren't where they need to be. We're going to have to, listen, get your box, gather your things, and go. No warning, no anything, right? So 2 hours in, I'm gone. I don't go to my second shift till the restaurant till later that day. So I'm figuring out how to not tell my wife, like, what am I going to do? I show up to the second job at the restaurant. Before my shift starts, the manager pulls me outside and says, Hasani, this is not working out. Give me your apron. This is your last day. I'm fired from 2 jobs in the same day.
I have to just say this. I have to say this because for the listeners, because I know you're the hardest working man I know. Like, I don't know another person that goes at it as hard as you do. Like, I think I even asked you one time, because by the way, Hasani used to be my boss at one point. So there's a little like fun fact. I don't know. I think I asked you, like, do you have an off switch? Like, is there something that turns you off? Because so I'm just sitting here shocked right now that in one day you lost 2 jobs. I feel validated. I'm like, oh, if it's not that. All right, keep going.
And so I couldn't go home. So I drove home, but drove across the street and sat in an empty parking lot for hours, trying to figure out how am I going to tell this woman that I just lost 2 jobs.
How many kids do you have?
I'm not
sure. How many kids
do
you have right now?
At that time, 3 kids. I don't know if you were working or not. I don't know, man.
Yes, I was working at that time.
Okay,
yes.
Well. Okay, so she was working at that time. So we needed every bit of both of our incomes to sustain life. And so at that time, we were fighting because we were trying to figure out what month, what bill wasn't going to be paid. So are we going to have the water turned off this month or the lights? Are we going to get the late notice for rent, or are we going to deal with no gas in the car? What's it going to be? Yeah. And I remember being in the midst of an argument, talking about bills, and the lights go out.
Yep.
So we were in constant, perpetual crisis. And so this is what I'm saying. It was an ongoing process that lasted for such a period of time. It just wore the both of us out. And so here I am. I'm a man. I can't financially provide for my family. All I know is what I'm good at. Obviously, this isn't working. That's not working. So I've got my own internal struggles. Then the house goes into foreclosure. I'm dealing with depression. It was a crazy, crazy time. So when we say we know what people are going through, see, people look at us now and say, no, not you, but they have no clue. They know they see the glory, but they don't know the story.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a story.
That's
so
good.
I don't know if I even answered your question.
Yes,
but
you did.
As a man, I was going through, my friend.
So Danielle, let me pivot to you, and I want you to talk about it from your perspective. But I do wonder, is it hard watching your husband pursue his dream, right? When you're like, that's great. I want you to have dreams, but we need electricity. Like, did you not get cynical, but did you kind of go like, I got to get this man back down to reality because he wants to go speak on a stage somewhere? Or how did you feel about his pursuits?
So when I met Hasani, I met him. Well, I didn't meet him that night, but I saw him speaking. A friend of mine brought me to one of his speaking engagements, and he blew me away. When I saw him speak, I actually went to God and asked God, I need you to do that. Whatever you did in him, I need you to do that in me.
Wow.
So fast forward, being married to him, going through all what he just explained, I kind of felt at some point, a little bamboozled because I saw this, powerhouse, but of getting close, I saw also the weak sides, like the part where he wasn't confident, where he didn't know, because he was a newly married husband and he was kind of taking advice from this person and that person. He kind of just didn't know which way he would go. I came from a single family, so I was raised independent. I had a job. When I met him, I lived on my own. I had a car. I was taking care of myself because I had to. And so a part of the struggle was that I felt like I could do this by myself. If you don't figure this out, I could do this by myself. And that was the biggest struggle. But I always knew that him working was not his strong suit, because it never worked out. I mean, every job that he would get, he would be driven to work on his passions. He'd be at their job, figuring out his next plan, his next speaking engagement, like all these things. And so what I learned really quickly is that I'm going to have to put my hope, prayer, support, energy into supporting him to be what God has designed him to be, or we're going to fail. Period. And I learned that early on. And so I never really resented the call on his life. I always wanted, as a matter of fact, I oftentimes was the one to encourage him and say, no, you are not going to quit, because this is what you're designed to do. This is who you are. And if you get a job, we're going to be broke and struggling, lights turned off, gas turned off the rest of our lives. But if you pursue the excellence that God has put into you and do what it is he's called you to do, at some point, there will be a breakthrough. At some point, the seeds that he has sown and that I'll help water will produce the fruit. And I knew that very early on.
That's powerful. But you didn't ever have a point, like, you believed that. There wasn't a point where you were like alone in the bedroom or the bathroom by yourself going, oh my goodness, are we going to be
like God, this? Yes.
Okay.
When he was on the road and he was speaking, because I knew it was bigger than speaking, but when he was on the road speaking, but the money wasn't making ends meet, it was just like, okay, we got to do something bigger. We've got to get on a bigger platform. You've got to raise your rates. Like, that's kind of the way that I think. I think that's what I've brought into it. It's sort of like, okay, this is what you do. How can we make this better? How can we build on this? How can we multiply this? How can this be a bigger way of doing it? Because right now, this small way of doing it, we are on food stamps and we're never going to get off of food stamps unless we do things differently. So I can't say I ever resented the call that I saw in him. I always felt like I was part of the assignment, but there were issues along the way. There were pitfalls along the way. There were struggles along the way that I hoped and prayed. And I remember one day saying, you know what, this is a dice I'm rolling. Like, either this is going to work or we are going to be epic fails. It's one or the other. And we rolled the dice, and I think we hit 8.
Yeah. So, but how encouraging for people who are currently going through a struggle, who can identify what we went through, because this may be where exactly they're at. And so it's a reminder that success is not a straight line. There are going to be detours. There are going to be setbacks, but a setback is nothing more than a setup for a comeback. And if you're willing to stick in there, things can work.
I love it.
Because, there'll be husbands and wives listening to this, and I will say that also I'm a wife. Right? I'm a wife. And so what is my assignment? It's to be a helper. But God did not give wives helpers. He didn't. He gave husbands helpers. And so sometimes the tables are turned, right? And so now oftentimes women want their husbands to be the helper, and it doesn't work in the same exact way. It's still the husband. It's still the wife that needs to help the husband. I don't care what your scenario is. That is the rule, and that is the law of God. And I feel like it was an easier flow for me because I am designed to be a helper, and the gifts that God gave me just perfectly matched with what he needed. It was like very dynamic, but oftentimes we have to discover what those roles are so that we can do it the way that God assigned us to do it.
And what I'll say is, we were disconnected. We were just going in two different spaces. There's a scripture in the Bible that says where there is no vision, the people perish. And it got to a point where through all the ups and downs, the hurdles, the challenges, we were not in alignment. But when we finally got in alignment and we came together like Voltron, we were able to do some amazing things. And it wasn't overnight.
Yeah.
It would just as you asked the question, was there a major crisis or was there a slow burn? The slow burn, right? The slow burn is what also caused us to rise up to get to the place where we are now. And thank God for it. Thank God for it.
Everything. We can thank God for every issue, hurdle, detour, reroute. There were many. Now, in hindsight, we can look and say, oh, okay, God.
See, but this is why it's so important to hold on to the vision that God has given you for your life and your marriage. Because think about it. If you don't have a clear perspective of what the end is, what the destination is, you will hate the journey. You will quit the journey. I ask people all the time, if you're flying from, say, LA to Atlanta, here's the question. Did you know where you were going before you got on the plane? Well, of course. Did you know where you were going before you bought the ticket? Of course. Did you know where you were going before you packed the bag? Of course. Who shows up at the airport and they don't know where they're going? You know the destination before you begin the journey. And even though our destination was
so good.
It was a struggle for quite some time. What kept us, what motivated us, what put the battery in our back was the end goal, the destination, the vision, the glimpse that God gave us of the possibility of what we could be if we honored his word and came into alignment with one another.
That's so good. That's really good, man. So I get curious about perspective. And, you know, obviously in marriage, one of the biggest deceits is this is all your fault, right? We begin to blame our partner. And it fogs or clouds our own judgment to be able to see faults in ourselves. The whole like plank in my own eye. How did you cling to truth when there's so much emotion, which can be, you know, like I like to say, feelings aren't good or bad. They're just feelings. They're not always true. You know, but they're there. So you have to deal with them. But how did you find your way to truth about who you really, you know, what was true about you that was hard to hear, right? Like I did some things that hurt her, or I did some things that hurt him. How did you get there? Why did you not choose, this is all your fault, I'm gonna bounce, like I'm out because you're crazy, or you're not good for me, you know, whatever the blame, fill in the blank for the blame. What kept you, why did you stay?
I think, you know, if there ever was a crisis moment for me, it was the day that we were in another argument and she was sitting on the edge of the bed and tears were flowing down her eyes. And she looked at me and she said, you know what, Hasani? You declitterized me. And when she said that, I had no clue. I know it sounded bad. I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded bad. And I'm like, declitterize you? What does that even mean? In essence, she was saying that I robbed her of her womanhood and stripped her of her femininity through my words and my actions. And it was a wake-up call because it was at that point where she was just like, you know what? You do you, and I'm going to do me. And I knew what that meant. That was the crisis moment. That was the beginning of the turnaround for me. And it had allowed me to reflect on all the things that she had been saying and complaining about, that I turned a deaf ear to, that I didn't want to hear. Because in my mind, the relationship was wrong because she was wrong. We were going through hell because she came from it. Right. But it wasn't until I realized that I'm the lowest common denominator in my relationship. And if I don't take the time to really look into my faults, flaws, idiosyncrasies, and all of that baggage that I came with, in the way that I thought, and my false sense of masculinity that didn't work in favor of the relationship, and my tone and my criticism, all my stuff, if I didn't work on that and work on becoming my best self, then we would remain in perpetual misery. So to me, the fear of losing her and losing marriage and family was the wake-up call for me. And that typically is the wake-up call for most men, because usually women want it much sooner. They want help. They want counseling much sooner. We typically want it much later, and we're motivated to do something when we feel that we're going to lose it all.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's good. How did you know, like, gosh, Danielle, I'm trying to figure out, like, that's a big statement to say to him. Was that like a Hail Mary to try and get his attention, or were you just like?
No, I felt it. I felt it in my soul. We were so disconnected. And, there are certain African tribes that actually they do declitorize their women. They cut out their clitoris, and they are not to feel any sexual pleasure. And
with that.
And I knew about that. And that word came to mind because that's how I was feeling spiritually and emotionally with him at that time. You see, I wasn't afraid of divorce. I understood divorce. I lived through divorce. I knew how to do single mom. I could do it. I've seen it. And from my perspective, one blessing that I had, not just one, but a blessing that I had was having 3 brothers that I was raised with, and they overcompensated for what I was missing. And so they always were telling me how wonderful I was, and they encouraged me, and I could do this and I could do anything. So I felt like I was amazing, on top of the world. Mm-hmm. Nothing was wrong with me. But when Hasani started telling me all the things that were wrong with me, and we got into all the criticism and all that, I just was like, this dude is crazy. I can do good. I can do bad all by myself. I know how to be single. Mm-hmm. What the driving factor was, and the glue that was sticking, why I didn't just say, you know what, forget this. This dude is nuts. I know who I am. My brothers have told me I'm amazing. He must be out of his mind. Was the fact that I wanted my children to have a 2-parent household. Mm-hmm. That was what was driving me at the time. While I was in that broken state, before Hasani had an epiphany, before he started bringing VCR tapes, I wanted my children to have a 2-parent home. And that was what kept me around. And thank God for that, because it kept me around long enough to get to the point where we were willing to look at ourselves and work at our own issues and idiosyncrasies to become better together.
Man, that's so powerful. So what was the hardest thing you had to accept about yourself to move? Like this was, you were not going to move forward together unless you accepted this. I mean, we can look back and see that, but in the moment, what was the hardest thing for you to accept that was true about you?
I think that I wasn't perfect. I didn't have anybody to tell me that I wasn't. My mom would encourage me and tell me. I think everyone overcompensated. Because I lost my father at an early age, not to death, but we left him for other reasons. And so when I would be criticized for things, I felt attacked. I felt like this guy is nuts, because nobody's ever said that to me before. Nobody's ever told me I couldn't. Nobody has ever told me I wasn't great. Nobody has ever told me anything but positive things. Mm-hmm. And so it really was hard to accept, oh crap, take a look at your family marinade, sis. Look at what you're coming from. Look at this broken home you came from. Abuse, violence, homelessness, being molested at a young age. Mm-hmm. You got some stuff wrong with you, certainly, right? Mm-hmm. But I couldn't see that until I started to do my own work. And then all those things came out and I was able to accept that. So that was probably the toughest thing.
What about you, Hasani?
It was my communication style because, I could spit venom with the best of them, but I wasn't trying to. It's not like I was doing it on purpose. I'm just a very straightforward, direct, say what's on my mind, however it comes out type of individual, or I was at the time, and it wasn't working. It was not working. And I had to realize that, yes, I can articulate, I can quote, I can speak on stages, but that doesn't make me a good communicator. It certainly didn't make me a good communicator with Danielle. And the way that I needed to talk to her, speak to her, listen, and engage with her was a skill that I did not have at the time. And it took me a long time to overcome my own idiosyncrasies, my own deficits, and develop some skills that were necessary for us to have a healthy relationship. So that was probably the biggest thing amongst others, but that was a big thing for me.
Were you taught anything in your home on how to handle emotion, process pain in a healthy way, coping skills, you know, when things got hard in life?
I didn't come from a household where they would sit down and teach me lessons.
Okay.
It was more observation and participation. Oh, this is how you handle this, or this is what's done with that. But even with that, like, I didn't see struggle. I didn't see turmoil that my mom or dad were going through individually or collectively. I think maybe those things were shielded from us. And sometimes, you know, you don't want your children to see or be exposed to or to know what's really going on, because you don't want them worrying about that. So I can't necessarily say that I had lessons like that. I think it was more exposure to a lifestyle, and you kind of, okay, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, and you kind of form your own opinion or get your own lessons, if you will. So I can't really say that I mean, if I went with questions, is, you know, they wouldn't deny me answers, but I don't remember having that type of experience.
Well, I have a completely different experience.
Talk about that.
I mean, no, we didn't deal with emotions. It's almost like feelings were a curse word. My home was very volatile and violent. You know, I would see my parents fight like they were trying to kill each other, blood, and it was never talked about. When I was about 27 or 8, I had 2 children. So maybe I was 30. I found myself super stressed out with my 2 toddlers. So stressed out. They were all screaming and crying. And I put the babies down, put them in the crib. I went into a closet, sat down on the floor. I grabbed my knees and kind of just was sitting there rocking. And in that moment, I remembered my 7-year-old self that used to do that exact same thing whenever there was crisis that would break out in my home. My parents were fighting each other, or my father, he would pull out guns all the time. He liked to play with guns. I would go and I would get under the kitchen sink and I would just soothe myself or cover my ears in that space to feel protected. So there was no safe place for me to deal with how I felt. There was no invitation to come to have a conversation about what just happened. And so that was kind of the way that I was. So getting married, you know, I was of the mindset of certain things you just don't talk about. Like, I don't have to share every little single detail with you because that wasn't really a model that was given. We didn't ask questions. You just did what you were told. You didn't know that there was anything to question because we didn't have Google to compare notes, right? And say, hey, right, mom said this, but Google says that. There was none of that. All we did was stuff those emotions. And I would have to say that about my 3 brothers as well. We kind of just didn't talk about things because we didn't know a comfortable approach to do so.
Yeah. I want you to answer this question for each other. Danielle, what is true about Hasani when he's facing pain, when he's going through the process of a painful situation, or he's just in a painful place? What's true about him?
What's true about Hasani when he's going through pain? He's really good at turning to his resources. I find that, you know, Hasani has a very tough looking exterior.
Yeah, he does.
He looks like he's somebody that, right? And he is someone that has a lot of things together, but when he doesn't know, he he taps into that vulnerable side that not many people get a chance to see. You got to get real close to him to see that vulnerable, sensitive side. And the person that he turns to is me, which I really value that about him, that he doesn't go calling on a whole bunch of people and all the friends. He turns to me, and we give each other wise counsel. So it's a really special place to actually know that soft, sensitive side of Hasani that most will never get a chance to see.
I love that face, man, that you're making. All right, same question to you about Danielle.
What's true about Danielle when she experiences pain, from my observation, is that she turns to God. And I've seen it happen throughout our marriage, especially in those rough seasons when we didn't know where we were going and what we were doing. And I noticed that observing her behavior, there was a pattern. So when hurt or crisis or challenge or struggle comes, there's a prayer, there's a going back to God. And so I think that is awesome. I go to her, she goes to God.
I point you to God.
Right? She points me to God, of course. Yeah. But I think that's awesome, because at the end of the day, couples, right, who struggle, I may not be able to trust you, but I could trust the God in you.
Right.
The integrity and the character that you operate in is because there is the presence of God operating on the inside of you, because we have our divinity side and our humanity side. Our divinity side is our desire to please the Lord. The flesh side desires to please itself. But if we're constantly dependent and relying upon the Father, it makes a spouse feel comfortable and safe in that relationship, that you will get through whatever you're going through.
That's so good. So what's one challenge you feel comfortable sharing that you're like, we're trying to figure this one out? You mentioned they have ideas that are different and that you're having to address. What's something that you go ahead?
We came through it. So I got to thank God for that. It was suicide. I shared a little bit about my testimony and what I've been through, and not once in my childhood did I feel so low, so bad that I wanted to kill myself. I never thought like that.
Yeah.
That was me. But I felt like the challenge as a parent was like, I've been through all of this, and I've created this cushy, cozy, amazing life for you with opportunity and 2 parents, all this, and you want to commit suicide. And so, that was one of the struggles that I was dealing with a few years ago with my daughter, who was she was being bullied at school. She was just struggling emotionally. She was feeling depression. She was just going through a lot of things. And she started having these thoughts. And I really struggled as a parent to empathize and identify with that. And I ended up just having to take it to prayer and call on my prayer warriors to help pray me through this situation and pray her through this situation. And thank God she has come through it. I mean, Maddie is like the biggest evangelist in the house now. But that was a major struggle for me, because I just didn't get it.
That's heavy. That's heavy. And a lot of people are experiencing that, because it's just the generation that struggles with anxiety more than any other generation, and that, you're right, Hasani, like, marriage advice isn't going to help you there.
No.
That's big.
Yeah.
What do you want to say to parents that might be there with their kid?
So there are a number of principles that we live our lives by, that we teach. One principle is in the form of a question. It's a rule we live by. Here's the rule. Who do you listen to? Here's the answer. You listen to people who have what you want and have been where you've been. So let me just give you a practical example. Let's just say I want to be a billionaire, as an example. Okay. Well, who should I listen to? I could listen to a Donald Trump, but he came from wealth. I didn't. I can't listen to him in that regard. But maybe I can listen to a billionaire who came from struggle, came from a mediocre, middle class background. There's a pathway that I could follow to get to that billion. Does that make sense?
Yep, totally.
And so likewise, when it comes to parenting, who do you listen to? You listen to parents or other people who are parents of children who are doing well, but they've come from the very place that you're currently in. So they have a similar story. They have a similar experience, and you can glean from their wisdom and follow a pathway that they took to get to where they are. So you listen to people who have what you want and have been where you've been.
Yeah. And what I would add is, life is spiritual.
Yeah.
And I think, oftentimes we think we could put all the puzzle pieces together and create a perfect picture. Like we thought we were going to have the perfect marriage, no problems. We're going to look good. Our kids are going to look good. We thought we were going to have this perfect life together with no problems.
Our kids don't look good.
Right? But it took work. Yeah, but it took work to get there.
Yeah.
And, but life is spiritual. And so, when nothing makes sense, when the puzzle pieces aren't fitting, because what Hasani said is so powerful, having that hub and spoke and those people that you can pull on who know what you're going through because they've been there. But then there's folks that are going through something no one can tell you what to do. You have nowhere to turn but to God and prayer. And sometimes you don't even have your partner, your spouse to lean on in that. They may not spiritually be where you're at. And so maybe sometimes it falls on you to be that prayer warrior, to be patient, to listen to your child who's struggling with whatever. I don't care what it is, suicide, homosexuality, bullying, you can name it, because these kids are dealing with a lot of stuff. Whatever it is, stand on the word, stand by your child, and stay with prayer, because when the pieces don't come together, it's spiritual, and you need to know how to change hats and go to the throne for your answers.
That's so good.
Absolutely.
Hasani, back to you for a moment. You almost drowned as a baby, right? I mean, obviously you don't remember that pain, but I'm sure your parents could talk about that. And there's been several pain points along your journey. Man, Danielle said this earlier, and I've always thought this about you. Like, you are a pillar of strength. Like, you not present like falsely, but you hold yourself with confidence, and you're sure of who you are, in a healthy way. But like, it hasn't been easy for you. I mean, you have fought your way, clawed your way, so to speak, to be where you are today. And I don't want to, because I do want to get into how people can learn more about Couples Academy and what you guys have to offer, because I think it's so good. It's just such great content. Man, how do you stay humble? How do you stay connected to Hasani that, had to come home and tell his wife, I lost 2 jobs today? Like, how do you keep it real on the regular?
I think there was a season in my life where I probably believed my own hype or believed what other people had to say about me, and wave the flag of I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm this, I'm that. And then you realize you're nothing more than a bag of bones, and you can do nothing outside of the power of God. And I think you have all these ideas of what you're going to do, and then they fall flat. They don't work out quite the way you want them to do. You want them to work out, and all the trials and tribulations and struggles and mediocrity that you've operated in along the way. But those opportunities where things did go well, you realize if it weren't for God, like not in a religious way. I don't even mean that. Like a lot of people are just religious and they say things that sound good, but no, real talk, because of relationship and really leaning in and coming to the realization that I can do nothing without him. That's what keeps me humble. So it's not a confidence, it's a Godfidence. It's the God that exists within me. So because I've come into a knowledge of who I am, and the more I learn about who I am, the more I realize what I can't do, what I'm not, and it is God, and tapping into his spirit and his system, seeking his presence, but also applying his principles have allowed me to rise up to experience a level of success and accomplishment that I have had. And you know what my passion is? Like here's the truth. I see how this world is run by the wicked. And it seems like the most successful, the wealthiest, the most accomplished are those who serve another God. And if there's anything that I loathe and despise, it's that. And a lot of my motivation is proven that you can do it God's way. Like we can be successful, we can be on top of the world, we can do great things, but God is the reason why. Right. And so if the Bible is true, which I believe is true, and if we follow it from Genesis to Revelations, it's given us everything that we need for success in this earth. Success in our marriage, success in our health and body and fitness, success in our business, success in every single area of our lives. As long as we keep the Bible in our hands, success is in our hands.
That's
it runs through our spiritual DNA. It's who God created and destined us to be. And so there have been times when I've allowed doubt and fear and insecurity to get the best of me, but I have to continue to soak and saturate myself. I have to brainwash myself of all of the self-doubt, negativity, and all that mess, and really begin to tap into who God is and what he's promised in his word, apply his principles. And if I stay connected to him, I know everything's going to work itself out.
Man, that is
so that's where my confidence and boldness and audaciousness comes from.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's so good. Danielle, you are 100%. I mean, when you told me about I didn't know all of what your story that you shared. When you talk about the independence and I got this and I know what to do with this and I can handle hard because, I survived this, lived through this. Man, it makes so much sense to me. I mean, you are powerful and you are bold. And I think of these things when I am even around you. You exude confidence that like I would borrow your confidence, just being around you. There was just assuredness, and it wasn't arrogance. It was no fear. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of what's coming at me today. I'm going to face it, is kind of how I experienced being around you. So my question to you is, how do you stay dependent on the Lord, on Hasani? How do you stay dependent?
Oh man, that was a good.
Golly, Jeff.
How do I stay dependent? There's a certain amount of certainty that I do have, as I go about certain things. I feel confident in a lot of areas. But there is this space that I think God, it's almost like a carrot that he's dangling. And, it's that space where when I'm uncertain about something and I go and I call on God and I ask him, if I'm not hearing, if I don't get that certainty, if I don't get that answer, it just continues to draw me back to him. And he's always been my source. I mean, from as young as I can remember, even when before I knew I was saved, before those days, I remember calling on God and asking him to protect me, to save me from crazy situations almost driving off of a cliff and dying. There are so many things that bring uncertainty in our lives. What makes me dependent is not knowing and not having the answer, and knowing that God is the only one that I can go to for those answers. Sometimes I want Hasani to have those answers. As my husband, I expected him to be the answer all, to know all the things, to be able to do all the things that I had idealized that a husband is to do. And I learned that he's not supposed to be my answer. He's not supposed to be my resource, that God is supposed to be the person that I depend on. And so I guess it's just hitting those stumbling blocks and those issues. That's what keeps me dependent. And I'm dependent on the Lord.
I do want to get into your ministry. What gets you guys out of bed in the morning? What makes this something that you're just gonna give your life to, sold out? This Couples Academy, the whole ministry of infidelity, of helping couples that have gone through infidelity. What is still motivating you to, because I gotta imagine it's not all glamorous.
No. I think so. There are many hats that we wear and functions that we operate in and duties that we engage in. It's not, okay, I'm going to get on the computer and handle payroll today, and that excites me. Or I'm going to write another, journal post for the blog. Like the tactical things don't necessarily do it for me. It's the purpose of what we're doing that does it for me. Like I truly believe, according to scripture, that marriage is God's first institution ever created on this earth. And I truly believe that man is the masculine image and expression of God, and women are the feminine expression of God. And when a man and a woman come together, they represent the image of God in the earth. And it is our assignment and purpose to advance his kingdom in the earth. And so the purpose of marriage, not just the benefits, but the purpose of it is what is a drive for me. And so to get up in the morning and to do the research and to get on a show, and then dealing with clients all throughout the day, and then focusing on our group programs and doing more research, and all of the tactical is driven by the purpose.
Yeah, I would agree. We do so many things, but I do feel like I found my own little niche in Couples Academy after so many years. It's really serving the women. I believe that, your strongest anointing comes through what you've overcome, the hurt and pain that you've overcome. And so as a woman, as a wife, we teach people how to overcome infidelity and how to get through it. But as a wife, it's like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but how do I do it? Help me do it. And I really have found a strong passion in helping to serve women discover who they are. I became a certified Enneagram coach, which I learned through. And so now I can use that skill to help them discover their strongholds and what's holding them back, so they could just reestablish their connection and their purpose in God. So I really love that part. It ties so perfectly into what we do working with the couples, because listen, if the wife checks out, listen, you got some serious problems. So we got to get the wives back on board and in position so that we could do this work. So, yeah.
Now, you guys work all over the world. I mean, I've just, seen what I can on Instagram or that you post on Facebook or online, but I know that you're all over the world with this stuff. Like physically, you'll travel and do conferences across the globe. So I'm curious, what are you seeing that's very common? It doesn't matter. It's universal. Marriage is marriage, and men are men and women are women all over the world. So maybe it's infidelity rocks a couple the same way all over the world, or what is different? What are cultural things? What are traditions that are in marriage that you come into contact with that you might deal one way with an American couple, or you might deal this way with an African couple. Like what are some of the things that you find that are similar? What are the things that you have to do different as you travel?
Well, for me, obviously the greatest commonality, the fabric that is kind of interwoven throughout all these marriages, regardless of language, culture, or geography, is infidelity. I mean, we are infidelity recovery specialists. And so I think that's why we have the opportunity of traveling all over the world, because most practitioners, therapists do not have any background or expertise in that space. And so because of what we do, we're pulled and drawn well, not everywhere, hopefully everywhere, but many places around the world to kind of offer some insight. So yeah, I mean, it is an alarming problem. Alarming. And it's the same struggle that many people around the world have, but I think the difference is the cultural nuances. There's certain cultures where it's socially acceptable. It is what it is. Like, why are you tripping? This is how we in our culture do life. You knew this coming in.
Right. They call it American culture. When like a wife wants fidelity, you're caught up in that American culture. You should expect that will be unfaithful. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's true. I think
men and women, or is it mostly the men get the free pass? Is it expected that the women are going to also step out?
No.
Yeah.
It is not acceptable for women to step out at all.
It's definitely socially not acceptable. However, the uptick of women engaging in affairs is increasing steadily, and depending upon where you are in the world, it's almost matching the percentage of men, and it's damaging. Now, so with the cultural differences is that there's certain cultures that have a true, how can I say, like, divorce is just not an option. So we'll be separated for 25 years, but we'll never get a divorce because it's not socially acceptable. Other places, deuces, I'm out. Right. In certain places, women are there. And I would say around the world, obviously, because you even spoke to this, a wife being the helping her husband in terms of fulfilling purpose. But there's one thing when your wife is a helper. It's another thing when you treat your wife like the help.
Right.
There's a major difference. So I think that in many parts of the world, there's so many men who have such a negative view of their wives. There's a chauvinism that takes over. Yeah. And so it impacts their ability to restore the relationship after the affair.
That's such a big thing. The role thing. And when you talk about, the wife is the helper and you're the, even Danielle, I think when you pointed out that men weren't given to women as the helper, that in the creation account, it's not good for men to be alone. I'm going to give them a helper, and that's been distorted. Like, I definitely know, you guys know my wife. She's a boss. She's a leader. She's a strong personality. She's got serious skills and giftedness that we often associate with men. And I think, Danielle, you also you talk about your independence. And so I think that you can maneuver easily through the world with the same kind of filters that I don't have a problem. I'll talk about this. I'll do this anyway. So break that down for me just for a minute. How do you keep the roles from getting distorted into that chauvinism? I often say, I grew up with my mom did everything in the house, took care of all of the chores in the house, and we got to sit in the living room and watch football and eat. And that was our roles. Men get to sit and watch football, women clean, cook, do all the other things like that. And that's submission. That's the definition of submission that I grew up with also, because we were raised in the church and with the idea that wives submit to their husbands. There's a second part to that, but I didn't ever really hear that much. Husbands submit to your wives. So how do you keep the roles clear, but not distorted with this weird view?
So it's interesting because I think most distortion comes because of ignorance, really. Because if people understood what that word helper actually meant, because in the original Hebrew, it's etzer kenegdu, which meant a suitable helper who is comparable, equal to, sufficient, meaning that she was never meant to be less than. That was the chauvinistic idea that was placed on humanity, whoever created that. But that's not what God's plan was. It was for her to come alongside Adam as a suitable equal helper, to help him replenish the earth and to do all the amazing things. Together they would do it. And so when people have understanding about what that word really means, they can let go of these chauvinistic ideas that she's supposed to be sitting somewhere in a corner, quiet, pregnant, cooking, slaving. No, she can be a boss. She can be a leader. She can run corporations and businesses. When Hasani met me, I was running a business. We run businesses together. And so I think there's just a misunderstanding, and there needs to be so much more teaching and understanding given so that couples can come together and partner and not be so competitive. Because I also think that chauvinistic thing, because society has changed and you do have working women alongside working men, I think that there's a competition that's happening now that never needed to be there if you understood that you were never the lesser as the woman. You were always an equal.
Yeah, I think really chauvinism is a problem. I think feminism is a problem, and it creates nothing but division within that household. And so we come in with these philosophies that don't serve us. And this is why we have to give ourselves permission to divorce ourselves from thoughts, convictions, principles, values that do not serve us in our marriage. I mean, we say all the time, listen, we believe in marriage and we believe in divorce. If you divorce you from yourself, if you divorce you from your horrible ways, it allows you to remain married to your spouse. So as long as you're divorcing the right one, you can stay married to your spouse. And you know, it's funny because there's a scripture in the Bible in Hebrews, and it talks about whenever a covenant is established, there must be the death of the ones who made it. So wait a minute. I enter into this marital covenant with my wife and God, but we have to die? Yes, you have to die to yourself. You have to die to these isms, these philosophies, these ways of thinking, these perspectives that are poison and toxic to your marriage. And when you can do that, you're resurrected. Come on now, and that's in the image of God in the earth.
The good news?
That's the good news.
Because we come into these relationships with so many issues and idiosyncrasies, and we're blind to them. We don't think there's anything wrong with us. We have no idea until we come together with our partner, and they are a mirror, and they reflect back to us exactly what we're giving. And if we make that decision to make those changes and work on ourselves, we can become better together. So true.
You've written so many books, but I read this in your book, The Audacity of Marriage, which, dude, is just so good. I mean, I think people could start with this one and as like a precursor to some of your courses. But you wrote this, man, and this just hit me. I mean, yesterday I read this and it rocked me. You said, you quote Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. You said, I sowed the seeds of neglect and reaped a harvest of lovelessness. After a long-awaited 5-hour conversation, I realized that if things didn't drastically change, divorce was inevitable. I'd spent years putting people's marriages back together while simultaneously tearing mine apart. I had been emotionally invested in the lives of others while being emotionally divested from my own family. It became apparent that there was only one way to turn my marriage and family around. It required a huge investment of my time. And I just, in a fast-paced culture, in a do it now, get it quick, drive-through service culture, there is nothing more true than the concept of sowing and reaping, that it is a slow planting, digging the hole, being out in the fields for long hours at a time, in the heat, in the sweat, hard work to get the life you want. to have the harvest that you want, to see God do the things that you want him to do. So I just want to thank you for that. I recommend to anyone listening to pick up their books. Where can people go to learn more about Couples Academy, and especially for people that are right now either dealing with betrayal in their marriage or they're headed down that road? So where can people find out all of the things that they that would lead them to you guys?
First of all, you can go to our website. That's couplesacademy.org. to find out about our programs and services. But we have a lot of content on YouTube. We have probably at this point about 800 videos. So if you go on YouTube and you subscribe to our channel, and that's simply Couples Academy, that's where we pretty much live. Yes, we're on Facebook and Instagram, but we really go hard in the paint when it comes to creating video content that could be impactful for people. So between those two spaces, obviously you can go on Amazon and type our names in, or type in Audacity of Marriage, and the book is there. And listen, it's an amazing book. It's very practical and applicable, and will guide you through a process that will lead to your personal healing and your marital restoration.
Yeah. And Danielle, for women, and I think the community of women who don't know how to raise their hand and say, I need help. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to keep hurting like this. I don't want to be treated like this anymore. How can they get connected to some of the things that you're doing with women?
Absolutely. Same website, couplesacademy.org, but go to services, where you can check out a program called Unearthed. And the Unearthed program is for any woman who is dealing with crisis in her life, particularly if they're dealing with the hurt of infidelity. They do not have their footing anymore. They don't know who they are anymore. They've lost themselves in the roles of being mother, daughter, friend, wife, all these things. They can go there, find out more, and also find me on YouTube right alongside with Hasani every Monday. You'll see me there. So,
guys, I love you both. I have so much respect for the two of you. And thank you again for agreeing to do this and spending some time to help other people out. I think that I think you're doing that in your everyday life, but hopefully this just gets out to a whole new audience that that reaches with your message.
Thank you.
And thanks, guys.